The unbiased news channels keep blaming Russia for their unprovoked attack on a sovereign nation, and that nothing can justify this. Do Putin's actions violate the Budapest Memorandum, that they would respect the sovereignty of Ukraine? And does it mean that treaties and agreements amount to nothing in today's world? And Quinn Reverence says Indians are in no place to criticize sensible and restrained US foreign policy. I love that. Sensible and restrained US foreign policy. If the US got militarily involved in Europe, it would start a world war. Then you'd be calling the US an aggressor, an escalator. If the US does nothing, then you will scold it on your high horse. If the US did anything more, you would scold it again, and so on and so forth. So until India has a clear position, sit down. This is what this most likely American gentleman is saying: sensible and restrained foreign policy. Okay, first of all, when it comes to treaties and agreements, remember the Iranians and the Americans, etc., and some other countries, that they had the Iran nuclear deal, an agreement that was signed and ratified, and the Americans just walked away from it, right? They tore the treaty into pieces. So whenever they want, they can tear a treaty into pieces. They can tear it to shreds. They can walk away from a treaty unilaterally. So then what is the meaning of a treaty in today's world? Zero, right? The Chinese had this treaty with the UK, that they would have one country, two systems with respect to Hong Kong. They walked away from the treaty unilaterally. So this is how it works. When you are strong, you can do whatever you like. You can set the rules, you can break the rules. When you are weak, you have to follow the rules. You have to obey the rules which are set by the strong. The strong powers will keep changing the rules whenever they wish, as they wish, to suit themselves. And the weak countries have to keep following the rules even when the rules keep changing. That is the way geopolitics works. That's the way the world works. So treaties and agreements actually mean nothing. The strong countries can change the set of rules anytime they want. They can break a treaty anytime they wish. Right now, they have been saying that the Russian attack, the Russian intervention in Ukraine, has been an unprovoked attack. Right. So let's understand. Do we have a map somewhere? Let's take a look at the map. Yeah, it's always nice to see the map. So let me share the map with you in order to explain what is happening. Where's the map? Where's the map? Here's the map. Let me remove the question and let's take a look at the map. So this is the map. Now let's take a look at Europe. So there is this organization or coalition or whatever you want to call it, called NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is essentially led by the US. All right. And in 1990, until 1990, NATO had 16 members, mostly nations that are in Western Europe. Okay, Western Europe, UK, France, Germany, and so on and so forth. These were members of NATO. The objective of NATO was to counterbalance the USSR. So it was an anti-USSR military alliance. That's what NATO was. Until 1990, NATO had 16 members. In February 1990, the then USSR facilitated the reunification of East and West Germany in exchange for an American guarantee that NATO would not expand even 1 inch eastward. Okay, so this guarantee was issued to the USSR by the Americans in February 1990. And the German reunification happened, the USSR broke up, and the successor state was Russia, to whom the guarantee still applied. In 1999, Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic became members of NATO. So the promise was broken. The guarantee was broken. In 2004, another bunch of countries, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, Slovenia, this entire bunch of countries became part of NATO. Again, the promise was broken. In 2009, Albania and Croatia became members of NATO. In 2017, Montenegro and North Macedonia became members of NATO. And now we have countries like Bosnia, Herzegovina, Georgia, Ukraine that have been promised NATO membership. Ukraine especially becomes a very big problem because it is right on the doorstep of Russia, right, and other countries too. So what it essentially means is that you will have US nuclear weapons on Russia's doorstep. Now imagine if Russia were to place Russian nuclear weapons in Canada and in Mexico on the American border, or in Cuba, which happened in the 1960s. How would the Americans react? Violently. But it's okay. for them to do it on the Russian threshold, to essentially encircle Russia. So these are deliberate, repeated provocations by NATO, by the US, and eventually it became too much for Russia to ignore, because that would essentially put them at enormous threat, right? So Mr. Putin, in the initial days of his tenure as the president of Russia, he had even considered applying for NATO membership. It did not work out, and you can see what has been the consequences of subsequent developments. Right. So when you talk about what was the term this gentleman used? The sensible and restrained foreign policy. Are you kidding? Sensible and restrained foreign policy. Are you kidding? Who are you kidding? This is incredibly provocative foreign policy, right? That the and when you talk about restraint and all that, where was the restraint in Baghdad? Where was the restraint in Iraq? How many people died as a result of the US invasion of Iraq? At least 2 million. How many innocent Afghans died? At least 100,000, I would say. I don't have the exact numbers, you can look it up, but very large numbers. How many innocent civilians died in Libya? At least 10,000 minimum. So you call this sensible and restrained foreign policy? Who are you guys kidding? Right. So that's what I can say. That's the information that is available everywhere. This is well known. I mean, there's no controversy here. These are just facts. So it all depends on when you start your clock. See, the way you look at history depends on what time period, what slice of time you're looking at. If you start your clock in late February 2022, then it looks like the Russians have suddenly launched an unprovoked attack on Ukraine, right? That's how it looks. But then if you go back to 2014, then you will see that the Americans have effected an illegal, unconstitutional regime change in Ukraine and installed a puppet government. So if you start the clock in 2014, that's what you see. If you start the clock in 1991 or 1990, when the Americans gave a guarantee that they would not expand NATO, and then it was broken repeatedly, then you will see a whole different picture. And if you go back further in time, and I've spoken about the history of the Slavic people and the Russian people, you will see that Ukraine is an artificial nation. There is it has never it's always been Russian territory throughout history, throughout the past 1,000 years, since the beginning of the history of the Kievan Rus people, right? With Prince Rurik, Prince Oleg, Prince Volodymyr, and so on and so forth. So in the previous one of the previous live streams I've gone into the details of this history. If you can you can look it up. So if you want to have a very narrow, myopic view of history, then it will look like Russians have launched an unprovoked attack on Ukraine. But if you look at the proper context, you will understand that there are reasons why this happened. The Russians were backed into a corner, and they were given no choice at the end. When all the options ran out, they had to do this. So that's what the facts tell us.